variety of things to do today. We got sculpting, painting, assembling, and starting mold making. Well, I do want to paint this guy for you today, so you can take it down to the convention with you. So yeah, I'll be making some decisions along those lines.
So he will
soon.
debut at Rose City Comic Con.
Kit the Traveler, my plan from the very beginning with Tales from Talifar was to have it be a omni-media IP franchise. So yes, I've always planned to have it be movies and TV shows. What sets me apart from what most other authors are doing is that I'm not going to let anyone else do it. I have to be the one who does it.
He has an iron fist.
I do.
He keeps throwing out my writing and telling me to do it again.
That's right. I hit her with a bamboo rod and say, "Do it better." No. What my plan is, and this is all predicated on the assumption that as the ability to create visual content gets faster, easier, and cheaper. This has just been a truism for the past 100 years. At some point, we're going to be able to make movies like Avatar with a small studio. Right now, it's the most expensive thing in the world to do, but they're blazing a trail. They're figuring out the technology that's needed to make virtual characters in a virtual world photoreal. Right, so they've got to get over that uncanny valley, and my plan has always been, I've been watching that trajectory, and thinking to myself, I'm going to be in on this as soon as I can be. It's still another, 10, 15 years out, I would guess, at least. But once it gets there, hopefully the books will have sold really well, and there'll be some demand for it, and we can start making some small scale ones, see how that does, and then scale it up if But yeah, that's always been the plan, and I've always wanted to have a franchise of my own that I have complete control over, and that I can make all the media manifestations of the stories canon, so everything goes together. The movie doesn't contradict the comic book, doesn't contradict the game, doesn't contradict the TV series, etc., etc., which so far no one has been able to do. But because I'm designing the world this way from the ground up, and as we scale the company, company so far being us two, with with a few contributions here and there from others,
I'm waiting for the person to join us who can make the comic books or graphic novels from these.
Yeah, that'll be neat. But yeah, building it from the ground up that way, I think is going to be the key to being able to pull off what no other of these giant companies haven't been able to do before. But what I won't do is I'm not going to sell it to Warner Brothers and have them make some half-assed terrible version of Talifar, and it ends up like an Aragon or any of the other 100 mildly successful book series that got turned into a crappy movie with John Malkovich or Jeremy Ironside in it, just kind of phoning in a performance, and it flops at the box office and it's never heard of again. Like that's what happens to the vast majority of books that gets turned into movies, and that's not my bag. It's not what I'm going for. Sorry, all you Hollywood agents who are busting down my door wanting to make a movie right now. Yeah, graphic novels would be a good next step. Getting the final, or more final visual design for all the creatures and characters. That's something that I just don't have the skill or capacity to do, so that's going to require, another collaborator to get to that point.
Why wouldn't that happen with the eyes like that?
Oh, you mean the rubber getting in there and then tearing out?
Yeah.
Because there's no undercut. Or
Ah.
very little undercut.
Okay.
Yeah, the rubber's flexible, but if it gets into a tiny little crevice and then who knows how much of a cavity is inside those crevices,
right.
That's when you run into problems.
Got it. So, how do you guys put a book together? Do you say, I want this and this in my book, Mom, and she puts it together, or does she take a look at your art map creatures to put a world together, or is it 50-50 on ideas? Well, our process has changed over the years, I think.
I suppose so.
At first, I mean, the very, very, very first beginning was Josh showed me a picture of two guys fighting on a disc over hot lava. And he told me that one would have to kill his best friend. And I looked at him and I said, why would anybody do that? And he shrugged and said, well, I don't know, you're the writer. And so I had to come up with a way that kind of thing would make sense. And then Josh would bring up a species or part of land, and then I would write that up, and then I'd get to the end of it, and I'd say, okay, now what? And then he'd have to come up with another species or part of land, and we worked our way through it, and then of course we had to go back and make sure everything fit together and didn't look like a disjointed blob of a narrative. But now that we're doing the standalone novels, Josh sometimes gives me a species he wants a story about, and we will brainstorm together, and we will talk about 500 things, and then I'll go home and I'll write something up and send it to him, and he will say, oh no, you forgot the most important thing. And I'm trying to think, okay, out of the 500 things we talked about, what was the most important? But we're getting better at this now. And sometimes I come up with a plot and he approves it or doesn't. And sometimes he just throws out an idea, and it will spark, yes, that will work. So I write the first draft, then I hand it to Josh, and he takes all the battles and makes them twice as long and twice as bloody. Then and we go back and forth on some things, because he'll think I emphasized something that shouldn't have been emphasized, or that I left out something. So when I'm generally done, I've got a 50,000 word novel. Then we send it to an editor, and an editor says, oh, you need 3 more chapters at the beginning. And we work through that. And then we send it out to beta readers, and beta readers go, but why did you do this thing? And so I either have to explain it, or I have to not do that thing. And by the time I'm finally done and we're ready to send it out, and we have the proofreader go through it and ask questions. Then by then I will have about 65,000 words. I tend to write tersely.
Yes.
So it's a dual thing.
Yeah, it's been evolving over time. I don't remember at all the story that she's reconstructed about me telling her, you figure it out, you're the writer. But
you don't remember that.
Well, whether that part is literally true or not, figuratively, yes. A lot of it was me saying, I have this world I've been developing, and I want a story that explores it. And I had the idea of someone who had to go collect things from all over the world.
Right.
I didn't have a good reason for it yet. At first I thought maybe he's a thief, maybe, that there had to be some core to the story that would lead on a road trip adventure throughout this big world that I've been developing. And yes, I definitely wanted the drama of, these island people and this awful ceremony that this guy has to go through. Um, uh, but yeah, as we've been making more and more of these books, you're working on number 11 right now,
Yeah.
right? So as we've been making more of them, I've been, it's been a decade, so I've been learning.
Yeah. Now we can put the manuscript into one spot, and both of us can look at it at the same time,
Yes, very exciting.
instead of traipsing back and forth.
But so my education, she's been writing professionally. You've published stories back 30, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
So you know the ins and outs of writing a lot better than I do, and I've been trying to educate myself on that a lot so that I can give better direction. I could be a better collaborator.
Mm-hmm.
I could not tell you to do stupid things that are noob mistakes, which for the most part you'll tell me that's a stupid thing, that's a noob mistake. But yeah, one of the noob mistakes I made is what you mentioned. I would go in and I'd make the action scenes way longer. And the reason I made it longer is because in my head I'm playing an action movie and I'm being the choreographer and telling the actors, okay, now you move your left arm here. Okay, now you spin around on your right foot. Okay, and that came through in the prose, and it was very bad. And so I've learned since then. I've watched a lot of videos. I've read books. I've read articles. I've gone to workshops about how to do action in the written format,
Mm-hmm.
and learned a lot. And so I've since gone back and shortened all of the action scenes considerably. Because coming from a video game background, I revel in the details of kinetic action, and I want what's in my head to be on the page, and that just doesn't work. You have to give the feelings of it, not the details of it. Anyway, the other thing that I think has changed, the thing that stayed the same is I still have this area of the world and these people.
Right.
We know hardly anything about them except for this bio that I've written about this race and culture. How do we make an interesting story here?
I keep wandering around your house going, okay, we have a premise, but we don't have a story yet.
Right.
What's going to be the story?
Like the Melting Kingdom, I had the premise of I want an adventure where these people are on a giant iceberg fort floating south on a river, and the fort is slowly melting and falling apart, and how do they deal with it? But yeah, that's not a story, that's a premise. The other thing I'm really big on over the past several years is saying, okay, I want a theme as well. So premise and theme are important to me. The plot itself is not my forte.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're very good at characters and plot.
But not so good at extracting what the theme is. I think this is the first time on this book 11 that I have said, okay, this is the theme.
Mm-hmm.
And which is she finds her voice.
Right.
Other times the theme just kind of arose out of the
premise
kind of
and the characters, and which is fine. But what's important to me is that because my goal is not to simply make another IP, another intellectual property out there that sits there with Harry Potter and Star Wars and Marvel, but to actually do something that makes the world better with it. And I know the only way I'm going to do that in a purposeful, directed way is to understand how to explore themes that can inspire people to be more loving to those around them. I don't know how that works yet. I don't know how to do that without being preachy. So far, we've made sure to err on the opposite side of not being preachy at all, right? But at some there's a spectrum in there, and you could look at books all along that spectrum, and the more they get to preachy, the worse they are typically.
Yes.
And the more nuanced and vague they are, typically the more award-winning they are, and they're seen as literature as opposed to spec fic or whatever. But yeah, we're trying to find our our voice, I think, which I guess that's the theme of your latest novel.
I think
How to
what's
do that.
common in most of the stories, though, I would say the theme that I do the most
Mm-hmm.
is unlikely allies.
Yeah. You like to make characters who have something about them that should be incredibly off-putting, and often is off-putting to begin with, but you can still win people over to care about them and root for them despite that. I think that's a big strength of yours, probably coming from, your background is, you're self-diagnosed on the spectrum, the autism
Mm-hmm.
spectrum, and you have a severely autistic sister or daughter who is my sister. I'll get this figured out. Um, and so, yeah, I think all of this leads to a very unique, authorial heart and voice, which I'm so excited about having as as a co-author. Eventually, we want to have other authors in Talifar, and they'll bring their unique perspectives and
Like
voices to it.
someday somebody will write. Josh wants me to write a Game of Thrones with the Magismontums.
Not exactly.
I cannot write anything
I just mean
political.
Yeah,
That
political
is so
intrigue.
far beyond my
Yeah.
capacity to even comprehend. I have no idea how you manipulate people to do what you want them to do.
Yeah.
I maybe other people don't either. That's why so many feature threats or bribes.
Typically.
Yeah. Anyway, I maybe someday in the future it will come to me how to do that. But I'm having more fun with the guys I am writing stories about. Let's see, Kit, do you ever have a light bulb click on in the middle of nowhere and send your mom a note on things, or her, or like a dream, and wake up?
Yeah, for sure.
What
I send you emails all the time.
Well, that's sort of a creative thing that happens, and it's a lot of fun. I remember I was walking around going, okay, we've got this character, we've got this character, we've got this situation, but we still don't have a story. And Josh said, well, how about you? And he said a simple little thing, and suddenly it all came together at once, and I knew exactly what I was going to do and how I was going to get there.
Yeah, wow.
I love that moment.
Yeah. I think because I tend to think big picture now, and this all fell into place. This didn't used to be my approach, but after I went through this process where I evaluated what are my values in life, what do I want to accomplish with my life, and this happened when I was designing a coming of age ceremony for my kids.
Yeah.
And part of the ceremony I was designing was, what values do I want to pass on to them? What do I feel confident in enough to say these are important values that I hope that you will embody, that I learned from my family and I would love to give to you guys. And going through that process made me start to think about applying that creatively to all the creative work that I do. And so I tend to think big picture first. And this is also a thing that I struggle with in other areas of art as well. So when you design a character, you could immediately go in and start with a whisker and a detail and the way the light shines off an eye, right? But those are essentially meaningless unless they fall within a form that is solid and pleasing and resonates with people. So because I always want to jump straight into the details, I've taught myself to counter that by stepping back and saying, what am I trying to accomplish with this thing, this character, this level I'm building, this book we're writing, this world I'm designing?
Well, I think one of the values that I hope really comes across in the books is that xenophobia is really stupid.
Fantasy and sci-fi in general are pretty good at that theme.
I think so.
you know, with obvious exceptions where, you know, you're taught that aliens are evil and want to eat us all. But um, but actually, I mean, that is a common cultural critique of Tolkien-esque fantasy, and you know, fantasy in general, is you have evil races. You know, the orcs, they're just evil, and that's the kind of thing that Talifar doesn't have. For the you could argue the siege, but they're barely sentient.
But they don't view themselves that way. They don't see what they're doing. They're just surviving.
Yeah.
They aren't born saying, "Oh, I'm going to go out and be ruinous to as many people as possible."
But for the most part, we do not have races that are, this is the X race, this is the greedy race, or this is the violent race, or this is, you know, we're very much in the people are people, everyone's individuals, and there are always exceptions to every rule, and it's more interesting to explore that and you know, have stories around that, to me, and it speaks more to our values.
Let's see.
Colleen
has followed.
Thank you for the follow.
Wow.
So yeah, but I think I got off on that tangent because you were talking about how sometimes I'll just say a thing that will, you know, make something click, and of course it goes the other way too. You know, that's what collaboration is all about. Is you are working with someone who is a different person. They've had different experiences in their lives and different perspectives, and a lot of times when we hit dead ends creatively, it's because we've run out of our own experiences to pull from to apply to that specific problem, right? And another person has different things to apply to it, and so there's that's what I love about collaboration, and I've always enjoyed collaboration.
You've always been good at that, and I have not been. So being a collaborator with you is a really new experience and a lot of fun.
Yeah, and also sometimes frustrating.
You mean when I rewrite your beautiful prose?
Oh, I meant more from your side. Yeah, I expect everything I write to be rewritten. That's because, yeah, like I said, I do not have 40 years of professional writing experience.
You haven't done to me what you did with the first book. I am halfway through the book. We're halfway across the world, about ready to turn around and go back, and then you tell me he has to be chased by this warrior woman throughout the whole book.
Ah, yes.
And if you recall my response, I said, for half a book.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I had to go back and put in references so that it would not be
out of nowhere.
Because I hate those stories that have out of nowhere elements just hop in.
Harry Potter is notorious for that. Every book, there's a new wing of the castle and a new kind of magic that just had never been mentioned before, and then often isn't mentioned in future books. It's just like, it just serves to be fun for that particular style. Time travel, or the like all these things that if Harry Potter just collected all these relics and techniques that he built up, he'd be an unstoppable demigod by the last book.
I feel like outside of the magic, you just described my story.
That is your story, yeah. How you're an unstoppable demigod?
Yes.
Yeah.
No, how it just goes on and on. You're like, where did that come from? You know? Ahoy.
Wahash says, "G'day, Josh, my boy. How are we doing this fine morning?" Also, Mrs. Foreman, fun seeing you on stream. Thank you.
Hey, Wahash. Oh, wow. Thank you for the sub. Wahash has subscribed. I would, oh, yeah. Okay. Thanks, Fizz. We got a giant bombing run for the sub.
Oh.
Hooray! Celebrate!
What's happening?
Wahash subscribed with Twitch Prime. Well, Fizz said you could make stuff so that you can, because you could control your character, the direction they go, and you can make them jump. So.
Fizz, are you a coder? I should know this. I really should know this.
You're asking Fizz if he's a coder?
Yeah, do you code? I can't read. Well, I mean, I can read you guys,
Yeah, Heather can't
okay?
read. You
I
guys,
just can't
she's illiterate.
see.
Please excuse her.
Illiterate with an I. What if it was like E-Y-E, illiterate? It's like I-literate. It's supposed to be.
And with that, I'll wish you all a fondue farewell. Bye, everyone. Bye.